Alpha.
What's up, guys? I'm Richard Gouveia and I'm back again with episode 3 of our wildlife photography workshop with Sony Alpha. And I'm really excited for this episode because while I was at Sabi Private Game Reserve, I had some incredible sightings. One of which being a clan of hyenas feeding on a rhino that had died of complications of birth. And they were tussling with vultures that were hanging around, and the hyenas were fighting with one another for a piece of this prize, this massive prize that was lying out there. And what I was trying to capture was the chaos. And then we also look at photographing hippopotamus, photographing kudu, zebra, and a lilac-breasted roller that I came along on this journey. But if you missed the first 2 episodes, please go back and watch them. Episode 1 covered the camera basics, how I set up my camera for wildlife photography, as well as basic settings and what they do. This will help you understand as we go through these episodes so that you have a more rounded understanding of what we're going through. And in episode 2, we looked at different sightings of lions, elephants, impala, and little birds called the little bee eater. Also, don't forget to check out the promo code WildRichard03, WildRichard03, for a 10% discount on your next Sony Alpha purchase. This is available on cashbacks.co.za, and all the terms and conditions are there where you will be able to figure out how you can claim that money back. So for now, let's get stuck into the situation with the hyenas. Now imagine rocking up in an open area and all you see scattered through the trees are vultures.
What's up, guys? We've got this amazing sighting. A rhino died of natural causes, what they think was a twisted gut, and they had to do an autopsy and make sure everything's okay. But what we've got is this absolutely crazy situation where there are probably about 15 hyena running around here, 50 vultures doing their thing, and it is insane. Absolutely, the noises, you can hear the hyenas in the background calling there, and it's just beautiful at the moment. So we're really just trying to get some shots. So my thinking behind the shooting here would be, it's quite chaotic, so I would like to capture some of the chaos. The hyenas are chasing the vultures off, they're fighting amongst one another, they're running after one another with pieces of meat. The youngsters are trying to get a piece of the pie, so it's quite an interactive scene. And because of this, we want to create that chaos, we want to look at the chaos. So what I've got with me today is a 70-200 on the A9 and a 400 2.8. The 400 at the moment is quite a lot of lens because it's getting really close up, but it's very good for more detailed shots, things of when maybe just a hyena's face or just bigger things. There's also a setting sun to my left here, which is really beautiful. But the 70-200 seems to be the right lens at the moment because it's giving a lot of space. It's teaching what needs to happen. It's showing all of the little bits and pieces and really getting some nice stuff out of it. So we'll have to see how the editing goes, but at the moment everything looks spectacular. Right, so one of the things we've also got to concentrate on here is shutter speed. Because things are going really fast, we can speed up shutter speed and try and freeze action. The other way we could do it is by slowing things down. So I'm shooting at about f4 at the moment to get a bit of depth because there's quite a bit of interaction between everything. And then from there we're working, making sure that the shutter speed is high enough. So I'm shooting at minimum 800th of a second, but I've been trying to keep it at about 200th of a second. 2000th of a second. And then from that point onwards, as the light is now dipping, the sun's about to dip behind the horizon, the light's going to start dropping off, so we have to consider what our thing is going to be. So I'm probably going to look at a bit of slower shutter stuff. There's a fight going on between two of them. And we're going to look at slower shutter speeds just to try and accentuate some of the craziness that's going on.
So now, as the sun was setting, one of the hyenas came up behind me, and it was a youngster that was spreading out, and they were moving all around me. But it was backlit against this beautiful golden grass because of the winter, and the golden grass was being lit up by the backlit sun, and I had this incredible rim light around this youngster. So what I did was stop the camera down, underexpose it by about -2.5, which gave me enough to really punch out the colors, those gold colors, and create that rim light. And I have enough dynamic range in the camera then in post to bring it up and bring the youngster out a little bit and bring out some of the details in the shadows in order to capture this image. Now, as the light started to fade and the sun had set, the first thing that's happening is we're losing the commodity of light. We're losing our thing that we use most in photography. Remember, photography is photo means light, and graphy means to draw, to paint. And we're painting with light. Now, as our light drops, we have to start thinking of different ways to do things. So I've already explained how I wanted my shutter speed fast in the beginning to be able to freeze the action that was going on. But now, because the light was fading, the idea was to slow things down somewhat. So I slowed my shutter speed to 1/25 of a second. ISO was about 1600, still to keep some of the speed. But what that does is I was trying to capture some movement, birds flying and flapping and their wings moving while something else was static. Or this hyena that was static and another one walking behind it. And it just gives you the sense of motion, a bit more sense of the chaos going on around it, and starts to tell the story other than just looking at a plain picture. There's far more interaction, far more time that your brain needs to pour over this to really get the feel of what's going on. So don't be afraid to slow shutter speed down. And we're actually going to look in a future episode at wildebeest and how to pan with wildebeest using slow shutter speeds to create the effect of movement. So in this case, I was slowing it down to create the chaos, to show the chaos that was going on around here. So the next morning I went back. Naturally, this is a happening sighting. It could possibly bring in other predators, other interactions. So as I rocked up into the sighting, the chaos was still going. The hyenas were still feeding, they were chasing vultures, and the idea was then to try and get one of the hyenas catching or going after a vulture and get that action of the vultures taking off and the hyena coming in. And it's not as easy a thing to do, even with the incredible autofocuses on our cameras. It's very tough when you're trying to focus through 5 moving objects on one thing running. So I took quite a few hundred photographs trying to capture 1 or 2 of these images that you're seeing now, but it became very difficult. Then at that point I went around the other side and got the backlight. As the light was streaming through again against this golden grass that was coming, that was being lit up by this rising sun, and the silhouettes of the vultures and the hyenas all around the carcass. This was accentuated by the dust that was being kicked up as things were moving and grooving around that carcass. And then lastly, there were some opportunities on the first night to photograph these guys in the dark using a spotlight. Now, because I was on my own and didn't have somebody to hold the spotlight, it became a little bit of a tug of war between my camera and the spotlight, but it was still a magical opportunity. Just remember, when you're shooting something at night, that you should have your settings at about 200th of a second generally, depending on the speed of your lens, and check out, put your ISO all the way up to 3200 and open your aperture wide up. And the idea is to create a very dark image with a singularly lit area like these ones that I'm showing you now. For more information on this, I did an entire workshop that is available on Alpha Universe YouTube channel, where you will be able to pick up that workshop where you can see how I shoot animals in the dark. But this was a unique situation. We had these hyenas whooping and fighting and doing all sorts of things. You can hear the echo as it's bounding across the bush. It was a beautiful sighting, incredible, and sometimes in those situations where I was fighting so much to try and hold the spotlight in the right place and take a photo, sometimes it's better just to put the cameras down and take it all in. Now that we've looked in depth at this crazy sighting of hyenas, let's tone it down a bit and take us to some general game, some stuff that we see on a daily basis that we need to pay a little bit of attention to in order to capture great shots. Because general game, as its name says, is general, a lot of people have different photos and there are specific things we're looking for to enhance our images. So in this, I'm going to look at kudu and what I'm thinking and why I do and shoot the way I shoot when I'm shooting these animals.
Right, so we've got a small herd of kudu over here. It's a bunch of females, and they're just browsing through the grass now. I mean, through the trees. And when we're shooting general game, it becomes very difficult. Because they're called general game, it makes it very difficult to get unique shots of them because they're quite common. Lots of people have tried and succeeded and taken lots of great photos. One of the things we have to remember is trying to create a story, trying to get them eating so you see what they're eating. You get the idea of things that are happening. One thing with kudus that's really outstanding are the massive ears, and they've got this pinkish color inside, and that coloration is actually blood vessels going through to the ears, which help thermoregulation, controlling body temperature. And when an animal is in alert stage, they'll perk the ears up and point them in both directions. So it's really important that if you can capture the ears facing in the same direction, you're already on a winning wicket. You get a sense of what are they listening to, what are they looking at, and that is a powerful, subtle message that comes along. Also, what happened just now, a couple of minutes ago, is I had a baby kudu come past mom, and I wanted the shot of of the baby, but I wanted perspective of how small it is. You can already see by the face that the face is quite beautiful and cute, but mom is standing, and I've used the mom as a frame to give a sense of size to the baby. The baby's also in the background, so it means it'll look a little smaller. The mother's framed in the foreground, which allows for a nice frame and a sense of size, and then you've got the baby nice and crystal clear.
Right, so now that we've discussed what happened with the kudu and how to frame and the thought process behind shooting antelope or more of your general game, and this applies a lot to other animals. Remember, any attention that is focused in a direction will automatically make the image a more powerful one. It'll tell more of a story. So now we went, and I was sitting at a dam with a hippo that was in there. At first, when I arrived, he was just outside the water. There was a herd of elephants that was coming in, and they were naturally going to start disrupting the hippo, and he might do some displays. So let's look at what happened at that stage, and I'll explain a little bit more around the backstory behind what I was looking at.
Right, guys, so what's happening here is there is a hippo that's on the other side there, and there's a herd of elephants that is coming into this water hole shortly. So I've set myself up on the other side. The sun and the light's quite nice. I've taken a few shots of this hippo already, but unfortunately I don't want to move too much, but there's a branch going across his face. But what I'm going to watch out for immediately is the fact that as soon as the elephants get here, they're going to push him. He's going to run back in the water, so there could be a good splash. So let me actually push forward a bit just for the idea of that. And so I'm going to make sure that my shutter speed's quite high at this point in time. When he goes into that water, it's gonna be with a splash. So it's quite cool. It's not often you get to see hippos out of the water like this. A very difficult animal in general to photograph. When they're in the water, they sometimes play and open their mouths and do this display, which you really want to try and capture. You get to see those incredible tusks, those big teeth, and you know, you've just got to try and get some action out of them. All of the thick-skinned herbivores are very difficult. The gray color, the dark colors don't exactly pop. They also have small eyes relative to their body, so it's very difficult to get the emotion out of eyes when photographing the animal as a whole. So let's see what happens when these elephants come up. But I'm pretty sure what's going to happen is he's going to start moving in. He might not be as freaked out because it's elephants, but there'll still be some form of freak out involved. So how I've set up my shutter, I've set it up to f4 and 1,000th of a second. The hippo's now heard, I think, the elephant's coming along. He might start moving into the water shortly. Might even give me a little bit of nonsense here. All this air bubbles blowing. He was shaking his tail just now. Let's see, maybe he gives us a little yawn.
Now, unfortunately, what ended up happening was the elephants never came. They actually stopped and grazed close to the edge, and I'm sure probably an hour or two after I'd left, they then went. But what I tried to do then was to place myself in a position where I would get the best angle to shoot a hippo at, which is often the lowest point. So I parked down below the dam wall to try and get as low as possible. The next thing I did was I used the 100-400, I used the 400 2.8 and I stuck a 1.4 times converter on it, which effectively gave me a 540 mil shooting length. And the idea behind that is the longer your lens, the more of an effect it gives you, that gives the viewer that I was out of the vehicle and on the ground, where I didn't have to put myself in harm's way. I could stay in the vehicle. So the longer the lens, the more it's going to appear that you are lower down, which gets you at eye level. And with a hippo, where you just have eyes and ears sticking out, it's important to create that and look at the reflection that's going along. Now, what happened was he just decided that he was going to start doing threat displays. So what they do is they open their mouth really wide and they'll show their teeth. It looks like they're yawning, but what they're doing is a territorial display. And because I had so much lens that I was trying to get the face in, as soon as he opened his mouth up, I had a bit too much lens, but I went off and I shot anyway. Crack, 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 shooting at 20 frames a second, trying to find the right composition and moving as we go along. And this is where the autofocus helps really a lot, because what it did was it locked onto things, and as I was shooting and he was moving, I could just concentrate on where my composition was, knowing that the camera would hold that point. And as he opened, you could see the water was spilling out his mouth, these big teeth, and it really gives you a sense of strength and a beautiful sign. Otherwise, all we'd have is just the hippo with ears, eyes, and nostrils sticking out, which is pretty, but it doesn't really tell much of a story. The other thing that aided the situation was it was quite light by that stage. By that stage, it was already 11:30 in the morning. It was bright. I was shooting at f4, so wide open, trying to get as shallow a depth of field as what I could. ISO 200 because I was already shooting, there was so much light I could go down that fast. And because of that, the shutter speed was still at 6400th of a second. So it was really fast, which aided at the point of this hippo whipping open his jaws. It was easy for me to freeze the action, freeze the water droplets, and get a great shot of this hippo doing what they love to do, which is show off. All right, so we've had a crazy hippo opening his mouth and doing insane stuff for us and how we froze this action. Now let's look at some zebra. And I'm going to talk a little bit like I did in the first episode of the camera basics, which is still available on Sony Alpha, on the Alpha universe, on Sony Alpha. But I'm going to talk about focus and how I use different focus points to compose and recompose images. And then I'm going to talk you through a few different images of zebra that you can consider when you're out in the bush the next time and you have these beautiful striped creatures in your viewfinder.
Right, so we've got two zebra here. We've got one over there and another one on this side. I'm shooting with the 600 today just to give myself a little bit more a change. The big thing that a 600 is going to do for an image is to give a good blur, and it also means that I'm far enough away. So what I want to talk about now is the focusing mode. So at the moment I've got a tracking flexible spot small on. I like that one. If I hold my button, it will lock on. Now it wants to jump to the bottom. Let's go to this guy. It's going to lock on to where I go, and I can then move it around as I please to get the shot. So I'm taking a couple of shots. As you can see, I'm really low on the ISO. I've got 200 ISO on the zebra. Shutter speed is 1600, and you can see my shutter spot is off to the side. All I have to do is put it on the middle and then recompose as I wish to do. Let's go to this other guy again. Lock onto his head, recompose, make sure his head is around the power spot, so where the thirds converge, where the top third and the lines will actually converge. I want the head around that area, and then I'm going to lock on and shoot. It makes it easy to shoot because obviously using a 600, I'm using a Ghetto gimbal, which gives me the stability, and with my setup of trying to get everything together is very important. So there's numerous things we have to consider when we're shooting. That's one of the things. So that's one of the modes of focus. The other mode of focus that I use is this flexible spot small, and what that does is it allows me to move around. So for a subject like this, I'm not going to use it, but let's say it's a busy situation, there's a lot of grass, a lot of things in front of something, and I just want to focus through all of that on something, and every time I push the button on my tracking, it'll find something else. So what I do is I use the flexible spot small and we'll put it in there.
All right, so we've figured out how focus works and using the tracking focus to be able to recompose and change our angles. Don't be shy when photographing things like general game, and we spoke about kudu earlier in the episode, and now we're talking about zebra, but leave things in space. Remember, the idea of wildlife photography is to not only shoot wildlife. The thing that makes wildlife wild is the space that they have. And if you leave space within an image, it will give the viewer and the people viewing those images, the power to see the space you were in. So like this zebra image was shot with very wide in a sunset, leaving the space and showing the open plains that they're in. But zebras too, because of their stripes, are incredibly powerful to photograph very close up. So full facial shots like this one, where you can get the different patterns. Their eyes are beautiful because they're really big and they often glint in the sunlight. Or side-on shots where you're trying to blur the background to separate subject from background to really create a powerful portrait image of these animals. Zebras are really beautiful and worth the time of sitting around. They can also do crazy things like fight. The males are very aggressive towards one another. And one crazy fact outside of the photographic side of things is that zebra males have harems. They have groups of females that they look after and mate with, and they will actually steal females from one another. One male, if he steals a female that's pregnant with another male's baby, will rape, kick, and bite that female until she actually aborts her pregnancy. She has the ability to abort that pregnancy, or if she's too far along, he'll wait for that foal to be born, and he will then kick it to death. And this nature of survival of the fittest is an incredible thing to be part of. Now, to finish up, we're going to look at one of my favorite birds, which is the lilac-breasted roller. Being the most colorful bird in Africa, it is a photographer's dream. Everyone wants a photo of them. And again, what is going to change your photo from anyone else's? Well, one, light is a big part. So early evening and early morning are good times to be shooting them, because as the sun drops, the reflective power of the sun's rays really bring out the colors of these birds. Another great time to photograph them is in summer. The reason being is they display a lot. They're doing mating displays, trying to attract females' attention and trying to be as colorful as possible. So it's always a good time to be photographing these guys. The next thing you have to remember is background. If you can put the background far enough away from them, you will get this beautiful blur, which will then allow for the bird to pop out. So let's look at this individual situation that I had while I was at Sabi and how I photographed it and what was going through my head in terms of settings and lens choice as I was photographing it.
All right, guys, so we've got a lilac-breasted roller which is sitting up on the tree in front here, and it is in the most magnificent light. And what you'll find is it's one of those birds that everyone wants to photograph, but it's about timing. Their feathers are reflectors of light. There's only a few birds like turacos that have an actual hormone that creates color. These guys reflect light. So once we start to get to this sort of light, this setting sun, the light and the colors of these birds really go. So I've chosen to do the 600. Obviously it's a little bit far away, and I've also stuck a 1.4 times converter on this guy. And what this is creating is an incredible amount of background blur. So I've got it wide open at 5.6, I've got ISO at 400, and I've got a shutter speed of 1600th of a second, which is perfect. And what this gives me is it allows for a nice depth of field, a shallow depth of field, but enough speed that if it took off, I'd be able to capture the takeoff. What I'm also doing is underexposing slightly. I want the background to become really dark, and I've chosen to park where the light is good on the bird, but I've also chosen a very dark green background, which then creates, missed it flying, creates an incredible light that comes to it. There was a scratch. So again, it's just him doing something a bit different.
Now, these lilac-breasted rollers are also beautiful in flight, and there are many different ways we can look at photographing them. Like I said, early morning, evening time are always good times because of the light, but a setting sun or a rising sun can give you some incredible color too. And by silhouetting the bird against a setting sun or a rising sun, you can create this beautiful blur. So in this image, I underexposed by -5. I really took it right down to darken the bird up. I even put my white balance to cloudy to warm the image up in order to create this beautiful silhouette of a lilac-breasted roller on a branch. The other ways we want to photograph them is in flight or doing something unusual, like this one that I found eating a fish. Of all things in the world, it's the last thing, if you look it up in a bird book, you're not going to see that lilac-breasted rollers eat fish. And he was a mile away from the river, so I don't even know where the hell he'd found that thing. So I hope that you've enjoyed our episode today and all the different discussions that we've had. If you have any questions, please contact me through social media. My handle on Instagram is @richard.de-gouveia, or you can find me by my name on Facebook. Happy to answer any questions that you might have. And I really look forward to showing you what we're going to be doing in episode 4. We're going to be covering photographing cheetah, rhino, and doing some panning shots with wildebeest. So there'll be some really interactive stuff in this, so I hope you'll join me for the next episode. And also don't forget the promo code WildRichard03 for a 10% cashback discount on your next Sony Alpha purchase. You can go to cashbacks.co.za to see all the terms and conditions. Unfortunately, these two big guys like the 600 and the 400 back here are not part of that deal, but pretty much everything else is. So go check the terms and conditions. Otherwise, be safe. I look forward to seeing you out in the bush, and please pop me any questions you might have that we can start interacting on the content. Have a wonderful day.